The Great Hall of Nexus Prime buzzed with excitement. Three of the most powerful alien races in the galaxy had gathered for what they believed would be their greatest victory yet. The massive chamber could hold thousands, but today only the most important leaders sat at the curved table that dominated the center. General Kraz of the Vorthak Empire stood 9 feet tall, his gray skin covered in battle scars. His 4 arms gestured as he spoke to his allies. 47 systems in 10 years, he growled with pride. Each conquest easier than the last. Beside him, Admiral Vex 9 of the Zelani Collective processed data through the blue crystals embedded in her skull. Her metallic voice carried no emotion. Human technology is primitive. Their ships use chemical rockets. Their weapons fire metal projectiles. Victory probability, 99.7%. The third ally floated above her chair, her form shifting like purple mist. This of the Nethys Communion spoke directly into their minds. I sense their fear across the void. 12 small colonies. No military tradition. They will surrender before we fire a single shot. The 3 leaders had good reason for confidence. The Vorthak were the greatest warriors in known space. Their ships could punch through any defense. The Zelani had technology so advanced it seemed like magic. Their computers could hack any system in seconds. The Nethys could read minds and control thoughts. Together, they had crushed every enemy they faced. The door to the chamber opened with a soft hiss. A human woman walked in alone. She was small compared to the aliens around her, barely reaching Kraz's chest. Her black hair was pulled back in a simple style. She wore a plain gray uniform with no decorations. Everything about her seemed ordinary. Ambassador Sarah Chen took her seat across from the 3 alien leaders. She placed a single datapad on the table and folded her hands. The aliens stared at her with expressions ranging from amusement to contempt. Ambassador Chen, General Kraz rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. We are pleased you came personally to discuss terms of surrender. It shows wisdom. Sarah looked at each leader calmly. I'm not here to surrender, General. I'm here to give you one chance to avoid disaster. Admiral Vex 9's crystals flashed as she processed this statement. Clarification required. Human military forces consist of outdated vessels with primitive armaments. Resistance is illogical. As it. Your scan data is incomplete, Sarah replied. But that's not important right now. What matters is this. Withdraw from all conquered systems immediately, and return control to their original inhabitants. This's mental laughter filled their heads like ice water. Little human dreams of giving orders to her superiors. How amusing. Sarah's expression didn't change. This is not a request. It's a warning. You have 72 hours to begin full withdrawal. Return sovereignty to every world you've taken. Submit your war leaders for trial. Pay damages to the families you've destroyed. The 3 aliens looked at each other and burst into laughter. General Kraz slammed his fist on the table, leaving a dent in the metal. Humans. Always so dramatic. Tell me, little ambassador, what happens if we refuse your generous offer? Sarah stood up slowly. She picked up her datapad and tucked it under her arm. Then you will face the consequences of threatening our species. And what consequences would those be? Admiral Vex 9 asked, her voice dripping with digital sarcasm. Sarah walked toward the door, then paused. She looked back at the 3 most powerful beings in known space. You'll find out. But when the Inferno rises, remember that we gave you this choice. The door closed behind her with a quiet click. For a moment, the chamber was silent. Then General Kraz exploded with laughter. Did you hear that? The Inferno rises. These humans think they're in some ancient war story. Admiral Vex 9 was already sending orders to her fleet. Deploying all available vessels. Human resistance will be eliminated within 48 hours. This reached out with her mind, touching the thoughts of humans across space. I sense their terror growing. They know what comes next. Within hours, The greatest military force in galactic history began moving toward human space. 700 Vorthak battleships, their hull plating scarred from countless victories. 300 Zelani cruisers, sleek and deadly, packed with weapons that could slice through planets. 200 Nethys vessels that seemed to bend space around them, crewed by beings who could kill with a thought. The combined fleet was larger than anything seen since the ancient wars. It carried enough firepower to sterilize entire star systems. The aliens had used similar forces to crush the crystal cities of Avalon, to melt the ice fortresses of Rigel, to burn the forest worlds of the Green Alliance. General Kraz stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Worldbreaker, and watched the stars blur past. His tactical officers reported perfect readiness. Every ship was armed and eager for battle. "Prepare invasion routes," he ordered. "We hit their outer colonies first. Drive the survivors toward Earth. Make them watch their empire crumble, before we offer them the mercy of slavery." Admiral Vex 9 coordinated the attack from her command ship, the Logic Gate. Her computers had mapped every human settlement, every trade route, every communication relay. "Primary targets identified," she announced. "Resistance potential minimal. Estimated casualties for our forces 0. 0. Thys drifted through the corridors of the Mindrender, touching the thoughts of her crew. Each alien mind burned with confidence and bloodlust. "The humans try to hide their fear," she whispered, "but I taste it like sweet wine. Soon they will beg for the privilege of serving us." As the massive fleet approached human space, long-range sensors detected the first human response. A few small ships appeared at the edge of their territory, then immediately turned and ran. The alien commanders smiled. Everything was going exactly as expected. Sarah Chen sat in her private quarters aboard the human transport Meridian, watching the enemy fleet approach on her personal scanner. She touched a small device on her collar and spoke quietly. "This is Ambassador Chen to Fleet Command. The 72-hour warning has been given. They chose to advance. Confirm all colonies are evacuated and prepared." The reply came instantly. "Confirmed. Ambassador. All civilian populations secured. Defense protocols active. The fleet stands ready." Sarah looked out the viewport at the stars. Somewhere out there, 12 human worlds waited in apparent helplessness. The alien alliance believed they were about to claim their easiest victory ever. They had no idea what humans were really capable of when someone threatened their family. The attack came at dawn on New Shanghai, the first human colony world to face the alien invasion. General Kraz watched from his command chair as 50 Vorthak battleships dropped out of hyperspace above the planet. Their sensors immediately detected the small human defense fleet waiting in orbit. 12 vessels, his tactical officer reported. Primitive design. Chemical propulsion only. They're running already. Sure enough, the human ships were turning away from the planet and accelerating toward the edge of the system. Their engines left bright trails against the black of space as they fled. "Pathetic," Kraz muttered. "Don't even bother chasing them. Focus on the planet." But as his ships moved into bombardment position, something unexpected happened. The entire human population of New Shanghai was already gone. Every city stood empty. Every spaceport was clear. The evacuation had been so complete and so fast that it seemed impossible. "Sir," his communications officer said, confusion in his voice. "We're picking up automated messages from the surface. The same thing. Broadcast on all frequencies." "Let me hear it." A calm human voice filled the bridge. "This world is no longer inhabited. All citizens have been relocated to safety. You are advised to leave this system immediately. You have 68 hours remaining." Kraz laughed harshly. 68 hours until what? They're gone. The planet is ours." He opened a channel to his fleet. "All ships, begin landing operations. Secure all major cities and installations. Similar scenes played out across 3 different star systems as the alien alliance struck at multiple human colonies simultaneously. Admiral Vex 9 led the assault on Harmony Station, a trading post built inside a hollowed asteroid. Her Zilani ships surrounded the facility, ready to blast it apart. But when her boarding teams entered the station, they found it completely abandoned. Every shop, every living space, every corridor was empty. The humans had taken everything with them. Even the food synthesizers had been removed. This is efficient beyond current human capabilities, Vex 9 reported to her fellow commanders. They evacuated a population of 50,000 in less than 6 hours. My analysis indicates they had prepared for this exact scenario. Prepared for what? General Kraz replied over the communication link. Running away? Let them run. We'll chase them down later. The third prong of the attack was led by Thys herself. The Nethys fleet emerged near the agricultural world of Green Valley, where humans grew food for their entire colonial network. Thys extended her mental awareness across the planet, searching for human thoughts to read and control. She found nothing. Not a single human mind anywhere on the surface. Impossible, she whispered. Her mental voice carried disbelief to her subordinates. I can sense thoughts from halfway across the galaxy. There should be at least some stragglers. Some who refused to leave. But Green Valley was as empty as the other human worlds. Vast farms stretched to the horizon, but no one was there to tend them. Automated systems still watered the crops and maintained the equipment, but the humans had vanished like ghosts. Over the next 48 hours, the alien alliance captured 7 human colony worlds without firing a single shot. Every planet was the same. Empty cities, abandoned bases, no resistance whatsoever. The humans had simply disappeared. General Kraz stood in the main plaza of New Shanghai's capital, surrounded by his soldiers. Empty buildings stretched in every direction. The silence was unsettling. This isn't how conquests are supposed to work, he growled to his aide. Where's the fighting? Where's the glory? Tresta. Gru. Long. Where's the fighting? Perhaps they're gathering their forces for a final stand at Earth, the aide suggested. Maybe. But this feels wrong. Too easy. Too clean. Kraz kicked at a piece of debris that had been left behind. It was a child's toy, a small spaceship made of plastic. For some reason, seeing it made him uncomfortable. Admiral Vex 9 was having similar concerns as she studied the data from all 7 captured worlds. Her computer systems had found something disturbing. Energy readings, she reported to the other commanders. Massive power sources buried deep beneath each captured planet. The signatures are unlike anything in our databases. Weapon systems? Thys asked, her mental voice sharp with interest. Unknown. The readings are shielded. My sensors cannot penetrate to determine their purpose. General Kraz waved dismissively. Probably just their power plants. Humans love to bury things underground. Makes them feel safe. But as the 72-hour deadline approached, strange things began happening across the captured worlds. Equipment left behind by the humans started activating on its own. Deep underground, massive machines began powering up. The energy readings that had puzzled Admiral Vex 9 grew stronger by the hour. On the bridge of the Worldbreaker, Kraz received an incoming transmission. The face that appeared on his screen was Ambassador Chen, still calm and composed despite the destruction of her colonies. General Kraz, she said. Admiral Vex 9. Leader Thys, your 72 hours are now complete. You have chosen to continue your aggression against our people and the innocent populations you've enslaved across the galaxy. Your people are gone, Kraz roared at the screen. Your worlds are ours. You have nothing left to threaten us with. Sarah Chen's expression didn't change. You've made a critical error in judgment, General. You assumed that because we evacuated our civilians, we were surrendering our worlds. What else would you call it? Admiral Vex 9's voice cut through the transmission. Preparation. Sarah replied simply. You see, when our species first made contact with galactic civilization 50 years ago, we quickly realized we were behind in technology. But we had something you didn't. We had experience. Experience with what? This mental voice carried growing unease. Experience with what my species calls total war. Experience with making hard choices. Experience with doing whatever it takes to stop a bully. Sarah's voice remained steady. But something in her eyes had changed. You thought you were conquering our worlds. But those worlds were never the real prize. On his tactical display, General Kraz suddenly saw something that made his blood run cold. All across the 7 captured human planets, the energy readings were spiking beyond anything his sensors had ever recorded. The real prize, Sarah continued, was getting your entire invasion fleet exactly where we wanted it. Close to our worlds. Committed to positions you can't easily retreat from. Confident enough to ignore the warnings. The energy readings went critical. You have 10 minutes to evacuate your forces from our former colonies, Sarah said. After that, you'll learn why humans don't just run away from bullies. We remove them. General Cross was already shouting orders to his fleet. Emergency extraction. All ships, maximum burn away from planetary surfaces. Now. But even as the alien vessels began their desperate retreat, everyone watching knew they wouldn't make it in time. The energy readings were approaching levels that could only mean one thing. Sarah Chen's final words echoed across all communication channels as her image faded from their screens. The Inferno rises. General Kraz felt the deck of the Worldbreaker shake as his ship's engines pushed beyond their safety limits. Around him, his crew worked frantically to escape the gravity well of New Shanghai. Through the main viewport, he could see other Vorthak ships fleeing alongside them, their hulls glowing from the heat of maximum acceleration. Distance from planetary surface? He barked. 400,000 kilometers and climbing. His navigation officer replied. But sir, the energy readings from below are still increasing. On Admiral Vex 9's command ship, every computer system was screaming warnings. Fusion reaction detected, her science officer reported. No, wait. Multiple fusion reactions. They're cascading. Deep beneath New Shanghai's surface, in chambers that had been carved from solid rock 50 years earlier. The largest fusion charges ever created by human hands reached critical mass. The reaction started at the planet's core and spread outward like a fire consuming everything in its path. For a moment, the planet became brighter than its star. The explosion wasn't nuclear. It wasn't antimatter. It was something worse. It was a controlled stellar ignition, turning an entire world into a miniature sun. The shockwave expanded at a significant fraction of light speed, carrying temperatures that could melt battleship armor like butter. General Kraz watched in horror as 3 of his ships, too slow to escape, vanished in the expanding ball of plasma. The Worldbreaker's shields flared as the wave reached them, overloading every system on the ship. Report! He shouted as emergency lighting flickered throughout the bridge. 30% of our force destroyed or crippled. His tactical officer replied. The planet is gone, sir. Completely gone. There's nothing left but a new star where New Shanghai used to be. But even as General Kraz tried to process what had happened, his communications officer received a priority message from Admiral Vex 9. Sir, it's happening at all 7 locations simultaneously. Across human space, 7 worlds became 7 new suns in a coordinated display of destruction that had no equal in galactic history. The Alien Alliance lost over 200 ships in the first wave alone, with hundreds more damaged by the expanding plasma storms. This screamed as the psychic shock of 7 worlds dying at once overwhelmed her mental defenses. The sudden death of millions of life forms, from bacteria to the plants the humans had left behind, created a wave of psychic energy that left her unconscious for several minutes. When she recovered, her first sensation was pure terror. Not her own terror, but something else. Something vast and angry and moving through space toward them. There are ships, she gasped to her subordinates. Thousands of ships, coming from everywhere at once. General Kraz was still staring at the new star that had been New Shanghai when his sensors detected the first human vessel. Then 10 more. Then 100. Then his tactical systems simply stopped counting, as thousands of contacts appeared on every scanner. These weren't the primitive ships that had fled earlier. These were something else entirely. The human vessels that emerged from the darkness of space were built for one purpose: war. They were black as the void between stars, their hulls angular and aggressive. No attempt had been made to make them beautiful or comfortable. Every line spoke of function over form, of ships designed by people who understood that sometimes survival meant making terrible choices. Admiral Park Jin-woo stood on the bridge of the human dreadnought Indomitable, watching his fleet take position around the scattered alien forces. He had waited 50 years for this moment. 50 years since first contact, when humanity realized they were not alone in the universe. 50 years since they learned that the galaxy was full of predators. Fleet status report, he ordered calmly. All vessels in position, Admiral, his communications officer replied. Project Prometheus is complete. 7 worlds successfully converted. Enemy forces scattered and disoriented. Excellent. Begin Phase 2. Park opened a channel to the alien fleet. His face appeared on screens across hundreds of ships, and his voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. I am Admiral Park Jin-woo of the Terran Defense Force. You have just witnessed what humans call a controlled stellar ignition. We developed this technology specifically for situations like this one. On the bridge of the Worldbreaker, General Kraz stared at the human admiral in disbelief. That's impossible. Your technology is primitive. We scanned your ships. Park smiled coldly. You scanned our cargo vessels and patrol boats. You scanned the ships we wanted you to see. Did you really think we would show you our real capabilities? During first contact? Our Admiral Vex 9's computers were working frantically to analyze the human fleet. Warning, her science officer reported. Unable to determine human weapon capabilities. Scanning systems being blocked by unknown interference. 50 years ago, Park continued, humanity made a discovery that changed everything. We learned that we were not the first intelligent species in the galaxy. We also learned that intelligence meant nothing without the will to use it. The human admiral gestured to something off-screen. You conquered 47 star systems, enslaved billions of beings, destroyed entire civilizations. You did this because you believed might made right. His expression hardened. You were correct. Might does make right. You simply assumed you had it. This tried to probe the admiral's mind, searching for weakness or fear she could exploit. What she found instead was something that made her recoil in terror. Park's thoughts were perfectly calm, perfectly focused, and absolutely ruthless. This wasn't a person driven by anger or revenge. This was someone who had studied war, the way others studied art. You have a choice, Park announced to the alien fleet. Surrender immediately and submit to war crimes trials. Return sovereignty to every world you've conquered. Pay damages to the families you've destroyed. Do this now, and we will allow your people to continue existing. General Kraz found his voice. And if we refuse? Park's smile disappeared entirely. Then we will demonstrate why humanity survived on a death world while you were playing politics in peaceful star systems. Around the alien fleet, more human ships continued to appear. Not dozens or hundreds now, but thousands. Ships that had been hiding in asteroid fields, behind moons, in the shadow of gas giants. The humans had been preparing for this moment for half a century, and they had prepared thoroughly. This is Admiral Vex 9 to all Allied vessels, the Zelani commander broadcast. Initiate emergency retreat protocols. We are outnumbered and outgunned. But as the alien ships tried to turn and flee, they discovered something else about human preparation. The humans had positioned their forces perfectly. Every escape route was blocked. Every hyperspace vector was covered. Admiral Park's voice echoed across the battlefield once more. You came here to conquer what you thought was a weak species. You found us exactly where we wanted you to find us. You did exactly what we wanted you to do. The human fleet began moving forward, their formation perfect and disciplined. Each ship moved with the precision of a machine. But behind that precision was something far more dangerous than technology. Welcome to human space, Park said quietly. Population, extremely hostile. General Kraz looked around his bridge at the faces of his officers. For the first time in their military careers, the greatest warriors in the galaxy were afraid, and they were just beginning to understand why. The first human attack came without warning. One moment the alien fleet was trying to organize a retreat. The next moment, 50 human ships had thrown themselves directly into the Vorthak battle line. General Kraz watched in shock as the human vessels ignored his fleet's weapons entirely. Instead of trying to fight at long range, they closed to point-blank distance and rammed his battleships head-on. They're insane, his tactical officer shouted as another human ship smashed through the shields of the heavy cruiser Bloodfang. Both ships exploded in a ball of fire, but the human had aimed perfectly. The explosion tore through 3 more Vorthak vessels. Captain Lisa Rodriguez had volunteered for this mission knowing she would never see home again. As her destroyer, Defiant, accelerated toward the alien flagship, she spoke calmly into her communication system. This is for every child you murdered on the conquered worlds. This is for every family you destroyed. Her ship's engines reached overload just as she struck the Worldbreaker's port side. The explosion rocked General Kraz from his command chair. Emergency alarms filled the bridge as hull breaches appeared throughout his ship. Damage report. Main weapons offline, shields down to 20%. We're losing atmosphere on decks 12 through 18. But the ramming attacks were only the beginning. As the alien fleet tried to recover from the suicide runs, the rest of the human fleet opened fire with weapons that defied everything the aliens thought they knew about technology. Admiral Vex 9 watched her computer systems overload as human cyber warfare programs tore through her ship's defenses. Impossible, she said as her tactical displays went dark. Our quantum encryption is unbreakable. Major Kim Tae-sung sat in the electronic warfare center of the human cruiser Phantom, his fingers dancing across multiple keyboards simultaneously. Around him, dozens of other operators worked to crack alien computer systems that had been considered impenetrable. Ma'am, he reported to his commander, I'm inside their primary communication network. Every ship, every base, every command center. They never imagined anyone would try to hack them through their own quantum entanglement channels. The humans had spent 50 years studying every piece of alien technology they could find. While the aliens had dismissed human computer science as primitive, the humans had been learning. More than learning. They had been preparing for exactly this moment. Across the battlefield, Zalani ships found themselves flying blind as their navigation computers fed them false information. Weapon systems turned on their own ships. Life support began failing as human viruses spread through systems that had never been designed to defend against such attacks. Thys tried desperately to use her psychic powers to coordinate the defense. But she discovered something terrifying about human minds during combat. When humans entered what they called battle fury, their thoughts became focused to a razor's edge. There was no fear to exploit, no doubt to amplify, only pure determination to destroy anyone who threatened their species. I cannot read them, she screamed to her subordinates. Their minds are like solid walls of rage and purpose. The human pilots fighting around her ship seemed to share a collective consciousness that no psychic power could penetrate. Every move was coordinated perfectly. Every attack was calculated for maximum damage. They fought like a single organism with thousands of parts, all working toward one goal: total victory. Lieutenant Sarah Kim flew her fighter through a formation of Nethys vessels. her weapons cutting through their energy shields like they were made of paper. She could feel the alien minds trying to push into her thoughts. But the combat training took over. Fear was irrelevant. Pain was irrelevant. Only the mission mattered. "Phoenix Squadron, this is Lead," she spoke into her radio. "Target the command ship. All units, follow me in." 12 human fighters dove toward the massive Nethys vessel. Half of them were destroyed by defensive fire. But the survivors pressed their attack with suicidal determination. When Sarah's fighter was hit and began spinning out of control, she aimed it directly at the alien ship's bridge. The explosion took out Thys's second-in-command and left the psychic leader reeling from the sudden death of one of her most powerful subordinates. But what truly terrified the aliens wasn't just the human willingness to die for their cause. It was the coordination. Every human ship, from the smallest fighter to the largest dreadnought, moved with perfect timing. When one vessel fell, 2 more took its place. When a formation was broken, it reformed around the survivors. Admiral Park watched the battle from the Indomitable's bridge with the calm focus of someone who had spent decades preparing for this exact scenario. "Communications. Signal all units. Begin Phase 3. "Yes, sir." Phase 3 commencing. The human fleet suddenly changed tactics. Instead of continuing the close-range assault, they began pulling back in perfect formation. But as they retreated, something new appeared on the alien sensors. "Sir," General Kraz's science officer reported with growing panic, "I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. They're not coming from the human ships." The aliens discovered that the humans had prepared more than just a fleet. Hidden throughout the system were weapons platforms that had been constructed in secret over the past 50 years. Stations built inside asteroids. Missile launchers concealed in comet trails. Energy weapons disguised as mining equipment. The entire star system had been turned into a weapon. Admiral Vex 9's remaining computers calculated their tactical situation and delivered a conclusion that chilled her to her core. Probability of successful retreat: 0.0%. We are surrounded. All escape vectors covered. Recommendation: immediate surrender. But General Kraz's pride wouldn't allow surrender. All ships. Full assault on the human flagship. If we're going to die, we take their leader with us. The remaining Vorthak ships, nearly 300 vessels still capable of fighting, formed up for one final charge at the Indomitable. Their weapons blazed as they accelerated toward the human dreadnought. Admiral Park stood calmly on his bridge as hundreds of alien missiles and energy beams streaked toward his ship. Defensive systems active. All batteries. Return fire. The Indomitable's shields flared as alien weapons struck home. But the human ship had been built to survive exactly this kind of assault. Its armor was 3 times thicker than any ship in the alien fleet. Its shields used technology reverse-engineered from captured alien vessels and improved with human engineering. Most importantly, its crew was willing to die to protect what they loved. "Sir," Park's tactical officer called out. "Enemy formation approaching critical range. Shall we retreat?" "Negative. All weapons. Focus fire on their command ship. It's time to end this." The Indomitable's main guns, weapons that had been designed specifically to penetrate Vorthak armor, spoke with voices like thunder. The beams struck the Worldbreaker's hull and punched completely through the massive vessel. General Kraz had time for one final thought as his flagship broke apart around him. These humans weren't just defending themselves. They were fighting for everyone the aliens had ever hurt. They were fighting for justice. The explosion of the Worldbreaker broke the spirit of the alien alliance. Ships began surrendering across the battlefield. Others tried to flee, only to discover that human forces had already moved to cut off every escape route. Admiral Park opened communication channels to the remaining alien vessels. His face appeared on screens throughout the fleet, and his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "This is Admiral Park to all surviving alien forces. You have 30 seconds to power down your weapons and surrender unconditionally. Any ship that does not comply will be destroyed. The surrender was immediate and total. In less than 6 hours, the greatest military force in galactic history had been crushed by a species they had dismissed as primitive and weak. But Admiral Park wasn't finished. As the alien survivors were taken prisoner, he turned to his communications officer. Signal the fleet. Set course for Vorthok Prime. Then Admiral Vex 9's homeworld. Then This's capital. It's time they learned what happens when you threaten the innocent. 3 weeks after the destruction of their invasion fleet, the surviving leaders of the Alien Alliance found themselves in chains aboard the human ship Indomitable. General Kraz, his 4 arms bound with energy shackles, stared out the viewport at his homeworld of Vorthok Prime. The planet hung in space like a wounded beast. Human ships surrounded it in perfect formation, their weapons aimed at every major city and military installation. No shots had been fired yet, but the message was clear. Submit, or face the same fate as the 7 human worlds that had become stars. This is madness, Admiral Vex 9 whispered, her voice filled with electronic static from her damaged systems. You cannot threaten our entire civilization. The galactic community will never allow it. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood before them. No longer the quiet diplomat from their first meeting. Her uniform now carried the insignia of a military commander, and her eyes held the hard certainty of someone who had seen too much war. What galactic community? She asked calmly. The one that watched you conquer 47 systems and said nothing? The one that traded with you while you enslaved entire species? That community chose its side long ago. This, her mental powers still reeling from the psychic shock of the battle, tried once more to probe the human woman's mind. She found the same thing she had encountered in every human consciousness during the fighting. An absolute wall of determination that no psychic force could penetrate. You're making a mistake, This said, her voice weak from exhaustion. If you attack our homeworlds, you become no better than us. You become the very thing you claim to oppose. Sarah's expression didn't change. You're right about one thing. If we attack your homeworlds, we become conquerors. But that's not what we're here for. She activated a holographic display that showed the current positions of human forces throughout the galaxy. Red dots marked every conquered world, every slave colony, every system where the Alien Alliance had committed atrocities. We're here to offer you the same choice we gave you 3 weeks ago. Full withdrawal from all conquered territories. Return of sovereignty to their original inhabitants. War crimes, trials for your leaders. Payment of damages to the families you've destroyed. General Kraz laughed bitterly. And if we refuse? You'll turn our worlds into stars, like you did to your own colonies? Oh. No, Sarah replied. If you refuse, we'll do something much worse. We'll leave you alone. The aliens looked at her in confusion. Leave us alone? Crow. You see, Sarah continued. We've learned something interesting about your empire over the past 50 years of study. You're not self-sufficient. Your entire civilization depends on resources and slave labor from the worlds you've conquered. Without them, your economy collapses within 6 months. She gestured to the hologram, which now showed supply routes and trade networks spanning hundreds of star systems. Take away the conquered worlds, and you can't feed your populations. Take away the slave labor, and your manufacturing stops. Take away the tribute payments, and your government goes bankrupt. Admiral Vex 9's remaining computers processed this data and came to the same conclusion Sarah was presenting. You're talking about the complete collapse of our civilization. Only if you refuse our terms, Sarah said. But we're not unreasonable. We're offering you a way to survive this. She touched a control, and the holographic display changed to show a different image. Dozens of human ships were landing on the conquered worlds, but they weren't attacking. Instead, they were providing aid to the liberated populations. We've already begun the process of freeing your slaves and returning control to the original inhabitants. But we're not leaving them defenseless. Every liberated world is receiving the same defensive technology that protected our colonies. General Kraz stared at the display in horror. You're giving them stellar ignition charges? Among other things, Sarah confirmed, along with fleets to defend themselves and the knowledge of how to build more. The galaxy is about to become a very dangerous place for conquering empires. The implications were staggering. Hundreds of worlds that had been helpless victims were suddenly becoming armed and dangerous. Species that had been enslaved for decades were gaining access to weapons that could destroy entire fleets. This will create chaos, Thys protested. Without central authority, these worlds will fight each other. There will be wars everywhere. Probably, Sarah agreed. But that's their choice to make. Freedom means the right to make mistakes, even big ones. What it doesn't mean is the right to be someone else's property. As if to emphasize her point, reports began coming in from across the galaxy. On Rigel 7, the ice-dwelling natives had already driven off a Vorthok garrison using human-supplied weapons. On New Avalon, the Crystal Builders were forming their own defense force. Throughout former slave territories, the cry was the same: never again. Admiral Park's voice came over the ship's communication system. Ambassador Chen, we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command. Put it through, Admiral. The holographic display shimmered and resolved into the image of an elderly human woman sitting behind a simple desk. President Elizabeth Hayes looked tired, but her voice carried absolute authority. General Kraz, Admiral Vex 9, Leader Thys. I am the elected leader of the Terran Federation. I'm speaking to you directly because I want to make one thing perfectly clear. The alien leaders found themselves staring at the most powerful human in existence. She looked nothing like a conqueror or a warlord. She seemed more like someone's grandmother than a military commander. What you experienced at our hands was not revenge, President Hayes continued. It was justice. You had the opportunity to resolve this peacefully. You chose war instead. That was your mistake. She leaned forward slightly. And suddenly, she didn't look like anyone's grandmother anymore. But I want you to understand something very important. What you've seen so far is nothing compared to what we're truly capable of. The display behind her changed to show images of Earth itself. But this wasn't the peaceful blue world the aliens remembered from their intelligence reports. This was a fortress planet. Massive orbital platforms surrounded the world like a metal shell. Energy shields flickered visibly in the atmosphere. Weapon systems the size of mountains dotted the landscape. 50 years ago, when we first learned we weren't alone, we made a decision, the president said. We would never again be helpless. Every human world is now defended like this. Every colony has the means to become a star if threatened. Every citizen is trained and armed. General Kraz felt ice in his veins as he realized the true scope of human preparation. We turned our entire species into survivors, President Hayes corrected. And we made one other decision. If our species ever faces extinction, we take half the galaxy with us. The image changed again, this time showing the human homeworld's sun. But something was wrong with it. Energy patterns danced across its surface in ways that no natural star should exhibit. Our star is now weaponized, the president said calmly. If Earth falls, automated systems will cause our sun to go supernova. The explosion will sterilize everything within 50 light-years. That includes your homeworlds. The aliens stared in speechless horror. These humans had turned their own star into the ultimate weapon of mass destruction. They had been willing to destroy themselves and half the galaxy rather than submit to conquest. That won't be necessary, President Hayes continued. As long as you make the right choice. Full withdrawal. War crimes, trials, reparations. Accept these terms, and your species survives. Refuse, and learn what human desperation really looks like. She stood up from her desk, and her final words carried the weight of absolute certainty. You awakened sleeping giants, and now you face the consequences. Choose wisely. The transmission ended, leaving the aliens alone with Ambassador Chen in the silence of the ship's holding area. For long minutes, no one spoke. Finally, General Cross broke the silence. If we agree to your terms, what happens to us? Sarah looked at each of them carefully. War crimes, trials. You'll face justice for what you've done. Some of you will probably be executed. Others will spend the rest of their lives in prison. But your species will survive. And if we refuse, then your homeworlds become history, and we find other leaders who are more reasonable. Admiral Vex 9's computers processed the options and reached an inevitable conclusion. We have no choice. We surrender unconditionally to all human demands. Sarah nodded. A wise decision. Admiral Park will escort you back to your homeworlds to begin the transition process. As the human ships began moving toward their final destinations, this managed one last question. What will you do now? Will you become the new Galactic Empire? Sarah looked out the viewport at the stars, where hundreds of liberated worlds were already forming their own governments and alliances. No! We're going home! The galaxy can take care of itself now that the bullies are gone. 6 months later, Ambassador Sarah Chen stood once again in the Great Hall of Nexus Prime. But everything had changed. The massive chamber was filled with representatives from hundreds of worlds. Former slaves sat beside their liberators. Ancient enemies worked together to build something new. The Galactic Free Alliance recognizes the sovereignty of all member worlds, she announced to the assembly. No species will be conquered. No people will be enslaved. No world will stand alone against aggression. In the back of the chamber, a small group of Vorthak refugees watched the proceedings. Their homeworld was gone, consumed by civil war when their economy collapsed. But some of their people had survived, and a few had even found homes among the species they had once oppressed. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. The Zelani collective had split into dozens of smaller nations. The Nethys communion had dissolved entirely, their survivors learning to live without the psychic domination that had defined their culture. But the galaxy was not at peace. It probably never would be. Freedom meant chaos as much as it meant hope. Wars still raged between old enemies. New conflicts emerged as species redrew their borders. Yet something fundamental had changed. The age of galactic empires was over. The strong could no longer simply take what they wanted from the weak, because somewhere in space, humanity watched and waited, and everyone knew that if the bullies returned, the Inferno would rise again. The galaxy had learned a simple truth that Earth had always known. Sometimes, the price of peace is the willingness to fight for it.